In other words, we're calling it Columbus Day. I think very non-controversial, frankly, but some people would say it's controversial. Go ahead.
This is like Explorer Day for you, sir. Today we have your Columbus Day proclamation for Monday, which we're signing a bit early. Christopher Columbus obviously discovered the New World in 1492. He was a great Italian explorer. He sailed his 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, across the Atlantic Ocean and landed in what's today the Caribbean. But this is a particularly important holiday for Italian Americans who celebrate the legacy of Christopher Columbus and the innovation and explorer zeal that he represented.
In other words, we're calling it Columbus Day.
Am I the only one that grew up confused with Christopher Columbus? Like, me being Dominican, I have Dominican parents, and they would tell me about the things about what Christopher Columbus would do. He would rape men and women, right? Taínos, if they didn't pick up his gold, he would cut off their hands and cut off their nose, right? And then, growing up in the United States, I was like, every time I went to school, it was like they'll talk about the Niña, La Pinta, La Santa Maria, right? And they paint this guy as a hero. And I'm like, I'm getting 2 completely different stories. And then I grow up and I found out that Christopher Columbus never been to the United States. Doesn't know anything about the United States. So it's like, it's not even the United States story. So am I the only one that's been confused?
Guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you for stopping by. So credit goes to all these creators, guys. For so many years, many people have been taught the same story. I mean, we all thought this was true about Christopher Columbus. We were told that in 1492, Columbus sailed across the ocean, discovered America, and this story was told over and over and over again in books, even in children's songs. Now, it was presented as an exciting moment in history. Columbus was shown as brave, curious, and important, and the story made it sound like America was empty before he arrived, like no one was there, like nothing important existed until all his ships showed up. And that story is not complete, because long before Columbus sailed, long before he arrived, people were already living on the land, right? Not just a few people, millions of people. The indigenous people, they lived across North America, Central America, South America, and even the Caribbean, right? And they did not just appear suddenly in 1492. They had been there thousands of years before that. Now, those people had homes, they had families, they had rules, they had systems of government, they had leaders, and they had farms, roads, trade routes, they had languages, music, stories, and beliefs, right? They understood the land. They knew when to plant. They knew when to harvest. They knew, how to live with nature. And this was not just an empty place, right? It was not a new place. It was somewhere that, had life in it. And another thing that is often ignored is where Columbus actually went. Because Columbus did not land in what we call the United States now. He landed on the islands in the Caribbean. And over time, his journey was turned into something bigger than it was. And people begin to say, oh, he discovered America, even though he never reached most of it. And the story was simplified so that it can be taught easily. But the truth about it was just removed. The important details were left out. The indigenous people were pushed out of the story, and their existence was treated as less important. So the story that we were all taught is just one side of history, is not the full part. Guys, what do you think? Let's see what these creators have to say, and I'll see you soon.
Christopher Columbus did a lot of things, many of which are now considered crimes against humanity, but one thing he did not do is discover what is now known as the United States of America. Yet somehow Columbus Day is a federal holiday in the US. Let's talk about it. Yeah, for reasons I'm going to get into later, the American education system made it seem like Columbus was the first explorer to discover America, but I want to let you know now that man never stepped foot into the 50-50. Not this. His actual voyages were in the Caribbean and South America. So I don't know how the fuck we got here. Or even here. Actually, wait, yeah, I do. It's because of this book right here, The Life and Voyages of Christopher Columbus by Washington Irving. This book right here is the reason why we have all these myths about Christopher Columbus and the United States of America and worldwide. Historians have described Washington Irving as having an active imagination, but I think we need to just call it what it is, cap. Washington Irving saw American history as a useful means of inspiring patriotism amongst readers, which is why he described Christopher Columbus as an adventurous, benevolent man who just wanted to help Indians and discover America, and that's what he did, which we all know is not true. Columbus was not widely known by most Americans till the late 1700s when America gained its independence from Britain, and Columbus became synonymous with American freedom. Also, this book really helped. Also, Washington Irving is the one who started the myth that Columbus went on his voyages to prove the earth wasn't flat. But that's not true, because people around this time, yes, even in the 1400s, they knew the earth was round. Even Columbus's dumbass knew that because of scholars like Pythagoras and Aristotle. He just thought the circumference of the earth was smaller than it actually was, and that China was really close to Spain, which we know it's not. Then after that, we get the District of Columbia, the Columbia River, Columbia University, Columbus, Ohio. I even have a Columbia vest. But then in the late 1800s, there's a huge wave of Italian immigrants coming to the US, but there's also a lot of anti-Italian sentiment. In 1891, 11 Sicilian immigrants were lynched in New Orleans. Italian Americans were facing both ethnic and religious discrimination. They wanted to celebrate the life and accomplishments of Christopher Columbus as a way to make Italian Americans mainstream and acceptable in the United States. Because of all the lobbying by Italian Americans and Catholic organizations like the Knights of Columbus, in 1934, President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared Columbus Day a national holiday. And listen, I'm not going to speak for Italian Americans because I'm not Italian, but I find it very interesting that Italian Americans didn't like the depiction of The Sopranos because of violence in the mob, and also Jersey Shore because Jersey Shore. But then why are we celebrating the accomplishments of Christopher Columbus?
Who discovered America?
Columbus?
His hesitation and the eyebrow movement tells me everything I need to know. He knows that Christopher Columbus did not discover America, but he knew that that was going to give him the right answer, so that's what he said. And I respect that. Hi, it's me from the future. When I first posted that video, it got over 1 million views. And it was because so many people kept trying to say that Leif Erikson discovered America. I'm going to give y'all a second opportunity to get the answer correct. And I'll give you a hint. When Leif Erikson came to America, there were people here. Who were they? It was the indigenous people. It was my ancestors. They were here first. Okay, they discovered America. Stop giving the credit to the wrong people.
Christopher Columbus is the only man in history who got lost, caused the genocide, and still got a federal holiday. Iconic failure, really. Let's just start with the obvious. He didn't discover anything. There were already entire civilizations here. Cities, trades, government, languages, agriculture. But old boy shows up like a confused tourist and has the nerve to say, "Ah, yes, I found it." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Like, sir, you were in the wrong hemisphere. And let's not pretend like this was some innocent sailing trip gone wrong. Columbus wasn't a pioneer. He was a professional butcher with a boat. He enslaved indigenous people, cut off their hands if they didn't bring him gold, and sold little girls into slavery. That's not a brave explorer. That's a war criminal. But wait, America gave him statues. They gave him parades, textbooks. They called him a hero. But they left out the part where he wiped out entire indigenous populations because of what he started. And let me get this straight. We're still debating if his name should stay on schools? That's like naming your hospital after a plague. He landed in the Caribbean and thought it was India. Then he did 4 more voyages and still never touched North America. But sure, go off, King. Navigator of the Year. The only thing Columbus truly discovered was how much cruelty a white man could get away with as long as he brought gold back to Europe. This April Fools, let's retire the original colonizer clown. Take down the statues, rewrite the textbooks, and stop celebrating a man who couldn't read a map, but somehow charted a course straight into mass unaliving. Columbus didn't discover America. He discovered how to destroy it.
Now, guys, the idea that Christopher Columbus discovered America is just the myth, simply for one simple reason. Because you cannot discover a place where people already live. Discovery means finding something unknown, right? That nobody knew before. But America was not unknown. It was known to the people that were born there, right? People that lived there, that were unalive there. Their ancestors were buried there, and their history was written into the land. So what Columbus did was arrive at the place, and that is just the honest truth. But the word discovery was used on purpose because it made European expansion sound positive, right? It made taking land seem acceptable, because if land is described as new or empty, then maybe to them taking it did not feel wrong. And this way of speaking just helped justify colonization, because this language erased the indigenous people without saying it directly, right? It made it seem as if their lives did not count, like history did not matter, like the land only became important once Europeans showed up. And this is why many people today are pushing back this story and this narrative, right? It's not as if they are trying to erase history, they are just trying to correct it, because Columbus can still be talked about as a, historical figure, right? But I feel that it should not be celebrated for discovering something that was there already. Because when we say Columbus discovered America, we repeat the myth over and over again. When we tell the full story, right, the truth that indigenous people were there and their history did not begin in 1492, it began long enough. This changes the story, right? It becomes more about honesty. It becomes more about recognizing that history has more than one voice, because Christopher did not discover America. He arrived on land that was already there, right? The people already had a hope. And guys, I feel that that truth is what should be said out loud. And all the stories and all these myths that we all know before should be debunked. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Do you believe this, or you're still arguing with the truth? I really want to know. And if you have found value in this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll definitely see you in my next video. Ciao.